Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining us with our Walk Through Acts series. Do you remember back in the day when you were a kid, maybe on the playground, and there was always that moment that came when a new game or a new sport was starting up where you had to pick teams and you ended up with maybe a couple of captains and they're picking out people that they think are going to be the best at their sport or their game that's going to lead them to success. You know, and you wanted the fastest, the strongest, the best, the most athletic. And you hope probably that you were one of them, that you were going to get picked early and often, right? And that was just, it was a part of growing up, whether it was good or bad or ugly for you. We kind of get that. And it's interesting with where we left off in the book of Acts. We see from the beginning toward the end this interesting dynamic of how it's how we go through life. We kind of look for the people that are going to be able to take us the furthest. But in the kingdom of God, sometimes there's an interesting little surprise and twist to what that really means and what that looks like. So we left with Saul being converted. He meets Jesus on his way to Damascus to arrest and destroy the church that is there, and yet he comes in this face-to-face encounter with Christ. He ends up becoming a follower of Jesus. He ends up promoting Christ in Damascus to the point to where his former friends and the people who were there supporting him, the Jewish people, are now turning against him because he's trying to convince them that Jesus is really the Messiah. So he has to escape from Damascus and go back to Jerusalem where he started all the chaos, all the problems. And now that he gets back there, the church, the people whose family members have been arrested or thrown in prison or even killed, don't trust him, don't really want anything to do with him, not really sure what to do with this guy who was so rabid against them. And now all of a sudden is saying, like, I'm a follower of Jesus. And it takes a guy named Barnabas who shows up and say, hey, here's his story. Here's what happened. This is legit and this is real. And Saul begins to preach and proclaim Christ again until his, former colleagues begin to turn on him, and there becomes this conspiracy against him. And it says that the believers, the followers of Jesus, kind of get him out of town so that this can all kind of put to rest. And a period of rest, of peace, lands, kind of descends on the church in Jerusalem. In fact, I love what verse 31 says, where it says this: the church everywhere in Judea, Galilee, and Samaria had a time of peace and became stronger. And to focus on this kind of cool part of this is, one, it's great that peace came back. I'm sure that was a huge relief for the church. But it's really cool to see what Jesus started talking about in chapter 1 of Acts. The point of what he is doing, the point and purpose and ministry of his church is that they're going to be his witnesses. They're going to share what Jesus has done in their lives, who he was, what he came to accomplish. And they're doing it. And it's growing. It's going from Jerusalem. It's gone into Judea. It's gone into Samaria. It's stretched all the way north now into Galilee. It's kind of covered Israel proper itself, and now it's like set up to start going into some new places. And the story in Acts, it transitions here to Peter again, and back to this guy. And Peter is traveling around these different places where the church is growing and moving, and he ends up in a couple places where this guy Ananias, who's a paralyzed, and he's been that way for a long time, like 8 years, and he comes in, he prays for him, and he heals him, and it's huge news. It's some of the first time a lot of these people have seen this happen, and again, just speaking of the incredible power of God working through these apostles, and it restores this guy. And I love that it says a town nearby, there's these followers of Jesus, and there's a woman in that church who has just died. And she'd been a widow, and she was awesome. And so they come running to this next town to get Peter to say, hey, look, one of the followers of Jesus died. If you heal this guy, maybe you can come and you can do something for us, for her. Maybe bring her back to life. Like, that's the thing. Jesus came back from the dead. Why not, right? So they recruit Peter, and they tell him about this woman whose name is Tabitha, but they sometimes call her Dorcas. And I tell you, I just get the biggest kick out of the fact that her name is Dorcas. It's a terrible name. It means gazelle. So if you're going to name your child Dorcas, go with gazelle. But they bring him in, and look at this. I love this. What happens? It says this in verse 36. In the city of Joppa, there was a follower named Tabitha, whose Greek name was Dorcas. Okay, she was always doing good deeds and kind acts. Right? That sounds nice. Like, what does that mean? Well, while Peter was in Lydda, Tabitha became sick and died. Her body was washed and put in a room upstairs. And since Lydda is near Joppa, the followers in Joppa heard that Peter was in Lydda. They sent 2 messengers to Peter, and they begged him, hurry, please come to us. Right? So again, they come all the way across from town to town. So Peter got ready and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the upstairs room where all the widows stood around Peter crying. And they showed him the shirts and coats Tabitha had made when she was still alive. So I try to picture this because I think this is fascinating. One, kind of interesting that back then when somebody died, you didn't take her to a professional to take care of the body for a funeral. You just did it. Everybody, the family, the friends, the ladies in particular, interestingly enough, got together and washed and cleaned and prepared the body. And now Tabitha has died. She's in this upper room. She's been prepared for burial. and they bring in Peter. And it doesn't say that they're like, hey, raise her from the dead, but they're like, hey, this is the scenario. Kind of like, I don't know, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And it says they begin to show him the things that she made. And in my translation, it says, the coats and the shirts. But I love in the Greek word, it's this word for the undergarment that they wore. And I love it because in my mind, I just think that she is a maker of homemade underwear. And I don't know if you've ever been given a gift of homemade underwear, but I can't help but think like your grandma knitted you something. It's super weird. Or maybe she made you socks, right? But it's one of those, like, that's an odd kind of thing in a sense. It's just not one of those things that most of us cherish. We just go buy our clothes at the store. But this lady had a reputation that she had been clothing people, well, all over this little church, apparently, maybe even all over this city, because it's just what she could do. It was her gift. It was her talent. It was her ability. It's what she had to work with. And I love this picture because she was so important because of her kind deeds, right? And it's kindness. It's not that she was a nice lady. It's that she was kind. She did kind things, which means she helped people, right? It's one of those significant little differences. Like you might say to somebody like, hey, that's a nice shirt, but you wouldn't say it's a kind shirt, right? Because the shirt's not doing anything. You're just saying you like it. It's pleasant. But a kindness is a quality of a person, right? When they're doing something of a moral or ethical level, right? They're building somebody up. They're taking care of some people. This is a woman who is full of kindness and goodness. So much so that when they hear about Peter, they're like, it would be really great if we could have her back. Like that's what's going on there. And it's because of this simple thing. And I guess I look at it this way. Here's Saul, who's going to become Paul, who's going to travel the world, and we're going to follow in the book of Acts, and he's going to do amazing, miraculous things. Here's Peter. Yeah, he started as a fisherman, but now he's raising people from the dead. He's healing paralyzed people. He's doing amazing. God is working through them in supernatural ways. They're kind of like those kids maybe that we think got picked first, in the sports and in the games. And then you've got this lady, Tabitha, the gazelle, and she knits underwear for people. And maybe she wouldn't be our first pick for the big final home run kind of a game. But I love that here in this book of Acts, it points to her and says, but this is the kind of woman that the church was surrounded around, that they were missing, that they were wanting, that they were asking Peter to bring back. And Peter prays for her, and God restores and brings her back to life. She is a woman who has this legacy, a legacy that is really described here, right, because of her good deeds and kind gifts, because she simply used what she had, the skill she had, the tools she had, what was available to her. She used it and she gave it away. I don't know what it is that you and I can all do. We've all got different gifts. You might not be a knitter or an underwear maker. Maybe you work on cars, or you can fix homes, or you can fix projects and do stuff, or clean up or mow lawns, and you can extend those kind of things to family, friends, and neighbors, right? Maybe you're good with taking care of kids or cooking, and you can make meals, or you can watch kids for people that need a help or a hand, right? There's all kinds of just little things, and I love that Tabitha to me is one of these people that just stands out as she's a practitioner of the little but important things, because here's what the cool picture is. The greatness in the kingdom of God is those who serve others, not just in supernatural ways by any means, but in the small, everyday, in fact, the relational ways are what so much that really, truly matters. And it's a cool thing because while there are, yes, some great, if you will, we can use the word superstars, the Peters, the Pauls maybe that are out there. Absolutely. God uses some people in different ways, but he is unleashing an army of Tabithas that are behind these guys. And they are unleashing a whole world of goodness and kindness. The very love of God is being seen through them and in them, because you'll notice there's already a church here. It didn't start when Peter showed up. It's already been on the move with a small army of unknown people doing little, incredibly important things, using what God gave them to use. And I find that to be such an incredible challenge. In fact, I think it's almost silly that I look at the book of Acts. I think this is honestly one of my favorite stories. Despite how grandiose some of these great miracles are, I look at this story and there's just something about this lady Tabitha that just makes me think that's us. That's where most of us live, and it's what God made us to do. And there's just nowhere better to be than living in the place that God made you to live and doing what God made you to do. And I hope on this nice weekend, this long weekend, this Memorial Day weekend, that you find opportunity just to extend some of that goodness and kindness that God has given you and figure out a way to turn some of that loose on your neighbors and friends. You guys have a great Friday. We'll see you later.